Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. My name's Jim. That's Taylor Jordan, special guest Grayson. Grayson, it is your first Draft Professor podcast. I would like to say welcome to the channel. How are you feeling about the podcast in Clemson this year?
Oh man, it's an interesting year, Jim. To be honest with you, and thank you for having me on. Where I felt like this time last year, every appearance that I made, I was talking about Clemson as a national championship team, and now this year, it's are the wheels going to fall off even further? Is the public question heading into this year for Dabo Sweeney's Tigers? So certainly a lot to dive into, and really looking forward to chopping it up with you guys.
Yeah, and if this is your first Draft Professor podcast that anybody has seen, because these shows tend to reach a wider variety, Jordan and Taylor podcast on the draft year round. And today we're doing a deep dive on Clemson's. We're going to focus on the players on Clemson's roster, where we are from a draft standpoint. We'll talk about, are they 2027 or 2028 draftable players, and just kind of where we see them. And Taylor, I'll kick this one to you to start the show off. When we're talking 2027 draft and we're talking Clemson, this was your first look at the players prepping for the podcast, Taylor. Where does the conversation go for you?
Yeah, this is gonna be, and sorry to Grayson and the Clemson faithful out there, but man, what a drop off in talent from an NFL perspective from one year to the next. I mean, quite honestly, like we had multiple first round picks, I believe, multiple in the second this last year. I genuinely don't know if there will be a first round pick on this roster. And I think that's crazy to say, potentially. But at the same time, watching them, nobody really stands out. Everybody has questions coming into this year. I think if I was going to take a leap of faith on someone that could potentially grow into a first rounder throughout this season, it would be Will Help, the edge rusher. And I think because he was part of the great Boilermaker departure after 2024, as we know, everybody left Purdue that year that was talented. Thieneman, there was, I think Injuries was on that team, or not Injuries, another tight end, Max Clare was on that team. A lot of people left Purdue. So Helt was one of those guys, and he stood out last year. He's 6'6", 260 pounds. He'll be a senior. He'll be second year in that defensive front. So he's one of the guys to me that probably has the best chance at being a top, first round pick. But outside of that, man, I would love to hear what Jordan has to say about, who he thinks could be in those, top 50, top 75 picks, because, I don't see a lot of high end talent on this Clemson roster, at least not that's draft eligible.
Go ahead, Jordan.
So for me, I don't have any first round grades on any of the Clemson players right now, but I do have quite a bit of. I would say, and not say quite a bit, like maybe 5 players I have in my top 100. I would start with the wide receivers. I think they're the most talented of the group, and that's between Wesco and TJ Moore. I have TJ Moore higher on my board, so I'll start with him. If you like the KJ Duffs of the world, then you'll probably like TJ Moore because he's kind of in that same mode. He's a big body wide receiver, 6'4". I think he's measured in about 205, 210. But he can do a little bit more after the catch than KJ Duff can. So that's why I like him more. Kind of in the Nico Collins mold, if I had to give him a comp right away. So the biggest thing for him is also, like we talked about backstage, quarterback play. We don't know how that's going to look. And it's really the first time in a long time Clemson has questions at quarterback. So that's probably going to be the downfall for him if he's healthy. But outside of that, I think he's the most talented player, or he's top 2 most talented player that are for the draft eligible guys this year. Like I said, he can go up and get the ball, high points it really well, and does a little bit after the catch. I think Wesco's better, but TJ Moore, at his size, somebody that can move after the catch is something that is really appealing. So I don't think he's a first round talent, but somebody that can sneak into the top 50 for sure.
Yeah, and I want to give a shout out to Sam Teets. So Sam Teets is a Clemson alum. He podcasts with Draft Professor most Sundays. Sam, it's good to see you in the chat. Grayson, sorry for interrupting. The floor is yours. Who do you think are who would be like the one or two guys that you think are at the top from a draft perspective?
Yeah, I would say going into this year, and Taylor, it's ironic too, where you had a team last year that was so draft heavy with picks. You had Peter Woods, TJ Parker, I mean, Blake Miller going to the Lions in the mid first round, and then Terrell, who I think without the hamstring injuries, probably in that late first round discussion, but ends up falling to the Falcons. So you had 4 top 50 picks, and you go 7-6, which is pretty baffling from just the standpoint that Clemson had last year. But yeah, Will Help for me is a pass rusher that I think could probably fall into the first round or rise into the first round if he has a good year. Another defender that I would probably say is a shot to maybe get drafted in the top 50 on just purely athletic traits alone and just things that I've been hearing from multiple draft scouts that do these Clemson reviews each year would be Sammy Brown, just someone that continues to get better, but the one bugaboo for him is pass coverage. Is that sideline to sideline, he's excellent when it gets to just closing down on tackles and just the relentless nature that he has. But it's the pass coverage where you like to see him develop a little bit more. And that was a problem for Barrett Carter as well when he got into the NFL and certainly struggled in year one with the Bengals, but certainly an athletic freak from that standpoint. And the receivers, it's a stacked receiver class, so it kind of goes against them this year where a lot of talk's going to be about old Jeremiah Smith here about this time coming up in the spring. But TJ Moore, certainly probably the more complete receivers of the two. I'd agree with Jordan there that you probably have a lot more to like in terms of body type. And there's a lot of skepticism with the quarterback play. And several sources with Clemson have told me that Clemson can get adequate quarterback play, then maybe Moore and Wesco can slide further with those stocks right there when we'll do mock drafts here in December and January. So I think those 4 right there would be my candidates for top 50 if we had to do that, but probably more leaning towards you're going to hear a lot of day 2, day 3 names for Clemson. There probably won't be this first round watch unless you have an all-American type season from either Wesco, Helt, or Brown.
Yeah, so why don't we start with Will Help? And Taylor, you did a reasonable introduction for him. I know that Sam Teets is pretty low on Help. Like I think Sam said in the group chat, round 4, round 5 range for him. Jordan, how high is Will Help for you on your board? And what can he do to move himself higher?
Yeah, he's right now I think he's edge 14 for me. So again, I have him in that 3 to 4 range as well, and I think he's 93rd on my board right now. Again, I've on record I've said that Will Hell he was the best defensive lineman for Clemson last year, and that's a defensive line that included Peter Woods, TJ Parker, Demonte Capehart. Like this was a really good defensive line, and he was the best one. He produced the most out of the group, so it was really impressive. But from an NFL perspective, does he have the athleticism? I know he has the size, and he can bend, and he can do all the things. Does he have the athleticism to be a every down edge at the next level? And if he's not, that's probably going to push him closer to day 3 than it will day 1 in the first round. So that's my only question for him. Again, if he has a season where he can improve on from last year, where he has 10 plus sacks, say like Grayson said, an All-American type season, which I think he can. The questions are going to be. The questions are going to rise at the combine and his pro day. What does he look like with the metrics and things of that nature? But outside of like from a college perspective, he's an excellent pass rusher. He's going to be the leader on the defense this year. And again, I think he has some questions to be answered as far as his athleticism, like I said. But from a production standpoint, I really can't ask for much more. But can he give it to him? Yeah, I think so.
So, first of all, I love hearing all the TJ Parker shout outs. Like, because, he was drafted by Buffalo. So, Grayson, if you didn't know, I'm a huge Bills fan. So, I will get to see TJ Parker hopefully for 17 weeks, plus the playoffs. But I'm loving hearing last year when we did this Clemson preview, it was all about, is Clemson one of the top 5 rosters in the country? Will they have 5 first-round picks? right? That's what we were talking about last summer. But it's definitely a different conversation here as we're in, July 2026. Taylor, if it's not Will Help, who was the second player that maybe you had as you were evaluating? Who is the second highest graded player?
Yeah, I don't. It's tough for me because with the way NIL is today, I don't really. I could see a world where TJ Moore and Wesco are both going back to school, right? They're true juniors, and like they're not in the top 10 of the wide receiver class right now for most people. Consensus, they're not. They might be on the edge of the top 10, but they're not solidified top 5. So like they're pretty far from the first round, in my opinion, right now. So I'm gonna go outside the receivers here, and I think Sam Teets hit it on the head. Ashton Hampton is probably one of the most physically talented players on the Clemson roster, and he's the son of Arkansas Pine Bluff head coach Alonzo Hampton, who, and Grayson may know this, but he was teammates with the cornerbacks coach Mike Reed in NFL Europe on the Frankfurt Galaxy. So that is a shout out between the cornerback coach and Ashton's dad, who's the head coach at Arkansas Pine Bluff. So again, he was a freshman All-American in 2024. So there's some things that he'll need to clean up with his game within the secondary, but overall, I think he's one of the more exciting pieces coming into that secondary this year. So, I know he's listed as a cornerback. He's 6'2". Again, he's a junior though, so he's probably a 28 guy. But it would not surprise me if he is the highest drafted of the players we talk about today, even if it's 2028.
Yeah, I would say with
Gordon-
Hampton, he's a fascinating case study of the lineage that Clemson has at cornerback, where we've had so many different iterations of the island guy that Clemson likes to roll out there, whether it's Nate Wiggins, who got drafted to the Baltimore Ravens, Avion Terrell just recently, or his brother, AJ Terrell there. And so for me, Hampton's always been an interesting case study because he's been this secondary corner for so long, and now it is his role to occupy. And I think physically you couldn't ask for a more gifted player with the sizes and the listing that Taylor had out there. But ultimately for me, for a secondary that had so many problems last year, he'd be one, or you're going to play Miami this year. You're going to play LSU this year. And I think this will help this as well, where the tape that some of these players are going to be able to put out, where Clemson's going to go into these games, LSU, Miami, you're going to have James Franklin of Virginia Tech, a lot of eyes on that one, where those are the opportunities to put out big tape against NFL players that Miami's going to throw out in LSU. Those are those opportunities for those guys on that defensive side to really improve their stock a little bit, where I could see, especially now with the 5-for-5 rule, where you can play an extra fifth year if you choose to, and you feel like maybe your draft stock isn't where you want it to be. That changes the dichotomy for some of these guys, where maybe they're making close to $1 million in college, and that's probably equal to the NFL, and you can stay and get all the benefits that staying in college football do too. So it's an interesting study right there for Hampton. Right now, I'd probably be shocked if he got drafted or went to the NFL draft this spring, but a good year as a CB1 for Clemson and the history that they have, anything can happen at that point.
Jordan, where did Ashton Hampton fall on your ACC cornerback board and on your draft cornerback board right now?
So if I remember correctly, he was my third-ranked cornerback in the ACC. And he is my CB7 overall. So like Sam said, second, third round guy. I think he's middle of the pack. I have him as a day two guy, early day two guy. I think he's 61st on my board. 61st on my board. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Ashton Hampton. I think he had a better 2024 than 2025, but we've talked about how the drop off for Clemson in 2025 was just roster wide. It wasn't just one player, but I still think he had a good 2025. I don't think it was terrible or anything like that. And like Grayson said, if he can come back and improve and be the cornerback one for a team like Clemson, who is consistently pushing cornerbacks to the NFL, I think that's something that's going to push him high on the board. I like you said, 6'2", 205, really, really athletic, can play physically at the line of scrimmage. I think he can jam his guys, does a good job with his hands. I don't think he's had a ton of penalties. Let me look and see. No, he only had 4 penalties last season, so that's good. So yeah, I'm intrigued to see what he does. Again, Clemson has a guy at every level of their defense. So can they be a good defense? And I think that's probably what they're going to have to lean on early on, with the young offensive line and the questions at quarterback. So again, I wouldn't be shocked if Hampton was a late first round pick.
Okay. And Jordan, why don't we pivot this to you? Who is another highly graded player in your board that we haven't necessarily done a huge deep dive on yet this show?
So I have some questions about Jaheim Lawson. I like the tape. I think he's a good athlete as well. I think he would have to have a really good year to not be a day 3 pick. I have a middle of the day 3 grade on him right now. And he's a top 25 edge for me, but I mean, he's 22nd, so not high end top 25, but he's somebody that I think he's intriguing. He's intriguing for me just because you've seen flashes from him, and again, he's played behind some really good NFL talent over the last couple of years, so he hasn't really got to blossom. And obviously, with his brother playing at Clemson as well before, and him, Jim Shaq, so he has the pedigree. So again, this year he'll be a full-time starter for Clemson, opposite Will Hite. So I'm interested to see how he does. Again, I don't think he's going to rise too high, but I could see him being a 3rd-round pick depending on the season he has.
So Grayson, what are your thoughts on Jaheim Lawson and kind of what's his history been at Clemson?
Yeah, I think that was an interesting name that you bring up, Jordan, because I think last year in a season where you're pointing in so many different directions about this negative and that negative, the positive name that kept coming up, even just the tape alone was one thing, but the way that Jaheim Lawson sort of galvanized this group when Clemson's 3-5, it was a really fun story to follow in that year. So he's a guy that sort of came in as this lanky 3-star prospect, was the younger brother of Shaq, as you had mentioned out earlier. And so his path was a little bit less linear than his older brothers, where he was a rotational guy and even a reserve guy for quite some time because he had to put on some weight. He came in as a pencil early in his Clemson career. So a guy that had a breakout year last year as a rotational piece where he was really that 3rd edge rusher with Helt and Parker occupying the starting spots. But like him in the run game, I think as a pass rusher, occasionally I would say I'd like to see him have a little bit more diverse set of moves off the line. Just with his size, he's got to be a little bit more creative at the point of attack. But certainly someone that's gotten better and better each year, put on more muscle, and that I could definitely see playing himself into a day 3 pick that is a valuable asset for an NFL roster where you're getting a good culture guy, not only, but someone that has proven over his track record with more playing time, he continues to get better. And so I wouldn't be surprised if maybe we're talking about Lawson as someone who's maybe a 5 or 6 sack guy this year, that his NFL stock just continues to climb with the story that he has. He's been a fun watch, and he's a heck of a guy on the beat just to chat with, as someone that'll get you a lot of good information and overall nice dude. So I would say he'll test well at the combine, and I would expect a big year from him in 26.
Taylor, did you have a chance to get a look at Jaheim Lawson?
I didn't do a deep dive on him. No, I do know he's a 5th-year senior though, and he's played pretty sparingly. So it'll be interesting to see. He'll definitely have to take a major step, but I do agree with Jordan. Then I think he'd be firmly day 3 for right now with the chance to improve. I mean, obviously he's got the NFL genetics, right? So he should be able to at least, and you lose guys like TJ Parker, you lose Peter Woods. Someone's going to have to step up, right, in that room. And it sounds like from what Grayson said, he was the kind of guy that rallied the team last year. So I'm excited to watch his trajectory for sure.
Cool. And Taylor, who's the next Clemson player that we should begin discussing?
I think we should just follow Sam's lead and switch to the running backs here. And I don't have too much on Chris Johnson Jr., so I'll let Jordan go there when we go there. But I just have to say one thing about rewatching some of the Clemson tape. I don't know how anybody in the world likes Adam Randall other than his size. He is a not good football player, and I said it all throughout the time last year. I don't understand the hype and appeal with there. I think genuinely almost any Chris Johnson Jr. And I have to I'm blanking on the other guy's name.
Gideon Davidson.
Gideon Davidson.
Anything that those two do is going to be better than what was on the field last year from a running back perspective, in my opinion. So
that's Eric DaCosta's guy, though, for the Ravens.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. He's the same size as Derrick Henry, and I guess if you can mold him behind Derrick Henry for 2 full seasons before he takes a snap on the field, but he is a wide receiver turn running back that literally can't catch the football, so out of the backfield. So I thought that was the most interesting thing for me. But I like Gideon Davidson. I think Chris Johnson Jr. is going to be another change of pace guy, right? They can come in and play. I mean, he was played as a part-time player last year for SMU, and he had. Once he got a lot of carries, he only had one game with 10 or more carries, and he had 100+ rushing yards. So it's kind of like a guy who has untapped potential, in my opinion, and I'd love to hear what Jordan has to say about him.
Yeah, so Jordan, I know that you mentioned Chris Johnson when we did the ACC running back show in May. What do you want to let everybody know about the Clemson running back room, specifically Chris Johnson?
Yeah, Chris Johnson's got home run speed. And I think that's the biggest thing. I want to say, Grayson, it might have been you that tweeted out about Chris Johnson's speed and his 40 time. I know he was a 4.3 guy at SMU, and you can see it on tape. I think you mentioned he's like a high 4.2 guy as of right now. But I mean, like you said, you see it on the tape. He averaged 7.1 yards per carry last season for SMU, and like Taylor said, he didn't get a ton of carries. So obviously his legs are fresh, which is good for Clemson. And obviously pairing him next to Gideon Davidson, who I thought was the best running back in the room last year. As a freshman, I was like, this guy, just play him. Like, there's no reason Adam Randall should be getting carries over him. And they did it anyway. But whatever. So, yeah, I think this is a really good running back room. I think they're going to surprise a lot of people. They're probably not getting as much praise as they should just because, they're not really household names as of right now. But I think they can definitely lean on this running back room. And I don't know what the offensive line looks like because they are really young. But if the offensive line can hold up and give these guys some holes, I think they're going to explode. Just because, like I said, Chris Johnson definitely has the breakaway speed, and Gideon Davidson does too.
Yeah, I like one thing I want to point out about Chris Johnson, just because I looked it up, and maybe this is the Blake Miller effect, but he averaged 10 yards when rushing off right tackle per carry, and he averaged 16 yards off right end. So, and he averaged 8 yards off the other end. He cannot run between the tackles, hasn't shown he's able to run between the tackles. But if he can get outside the offensive line, hell, it might not matter. You just get outside the offensive line, and he's averaging, 8, 9, 10, 15 yards a carry. So, yeah, I'm excited to watch him develop and hopefully, take some to the house with the home run speed.
Yeah, this was certainly a Chad Morris edition in the transfer portal. Remember getting that scoop and watching his tape and being blown away with the type of breakaway speed that he possesses, something that Clemson really hasn't had on offense in quite some time. Of course, they've had the big-bodied receivers. They've probably the breakaway speed, the last time you've seen it on this roster was probably with Travis Etienne, with Trevor Lawrence in that day. Just someone that you can give the ball once, and he's got a chance to take it to the house every single time. And so it was fascinating when he came on campus, and you had gotten this challenge essentially from Dabo Swinney where they told him, hey, we think you're good, but honestly, you could be a lot better. And if you put on some weight and you continue kind of with your training with the nutrition program they have at Clemson, like, we think you could be a 4.2 guy. And it seems like he told him challenge accepted because they laser timed him at I think last week, it was what Clemson's strength coach told us at Clemson's media day. He's running a 4.24 right now, which is ridiculous speed for any roster to have. And so I think another fascinating aspect of this is we had talked to Clemson's offensive coordinator about this specific type of playmaker and how you would use him. And they said they watched a lot of Malachi Tony tape with him and really think that he's somebody that they think they can get out in space as not just a back that probably isn't running between the tackles, Taylor, like you said. I would be surprised if he's like a 20 carry an afternoon type of back, maybe more 8 to 12. And probably half those touches are probably coming through the air as someone that they want to maybe get some screens set up for him. They want to get some drags out and just see what he can do in space. I think that's the vision for Clemson right now. And I don't necessarily know what his draft stock would be currently, but you can put together an all-purpose year where maybe cracking 1,000 yards and you have that kind of speed. I mean, heck, the Bengals drafted John Ross with the 4.24 speed. So maybe anything's possible, right?
Wait, Grayson, when I give you the name Andre Ellington, what does that say? Because Andre Ellington was the running back during Chad Morris's tenure as OC at Clemson. He was a 1,000-yard rusher back-to-back seasons, and he never really caught more than 15 or 20 balls in a season. So, right, last year, 17 catches for Chris Johnson. So even in a part-time role, while you think, oh, change of pace back being more of a receiving back, he doesn't have a high receiving profile to suggest that that's the case. But it's interesting hearing the Malachi Tony comps because I just looked at the stats from 2011, 2012 Clemson. It's Andre Ellington, and I'm like, he was extremely fast, and he had kind of a similar thing. He ran outside, and he, didn't necessarily have a receiving volume, but that still worked in Chad Morris's offense. So I think it's an interesting, comp maybe.
Yeah, certainly just a staff that I think just wants to get him the ball and sort of be creative with it is, I think, the plan for Clemson. They expect Gideon Davidson to take that leap to be your bell cow back in that sense, but also I think Clemson could be running a lot of two-back sets this year where you just have that threat. If you can get it on tape and expose that threat of, hey, we got this guy who can, we got someone on tape where he's taking a screen 70 yards to the house. We're going to throw him out there in the backfield, and you have to give him attention. That opens it up for other guys on offense. And for a young quarterback and young offensive line, that's going to be a pretty big save right there for them as well. So certainly a talent you don't want to have on the sidelines for Clemson. I think that's someone that's got to be on the field for a good majority of your games there.
Okay. That was on Chris Johnson, the running back from Clemson. Jordan, where does the draft conversation go next?
So I like Corey. Is it Myrick? Coming from he's coming from Southern Miss, I believe. Transfer.
Yeah.
So I think he's very talented. My question is, do you think he's more of a 2028 guy, or is he a 2027 guy? I know he's a junior coming in. I think he had a phenomenal year last year, and obviously jumping up to Power 4 competition is going to be the question that everybody has. But I think he's one of the better safeties that Clemson's had, in quite some time, in my opinion. I think if you just look at his size, 6'3", 200 pounds, he was good. He really good in coverage last year for Southern Miss. So yeah, I think he was no slouch in there. And then also, he's a tackling machine. So he's somebody that I'm interested to see how he does this year. But again, I currently have him pegged as a 2028 guy just because I don't know what he's going to do. And like Taylor said earlier with the NIL, I mean, I think all of these guys, except for maybe Will Help, can come back next year. So I'll put Corey Myrick on my board just because I think he's a phenomenal talent. But I do want to see how he does against Power 4 competition in comparison to the Southern Miss schedule that he had last year.
Yeah, I think that's the drawback right now is you want to see how he takes that next step from G5. Is it G6 now is what they're calling it? I mean, it changes every day, it feels like.
Pac-12 was back.
Pac-12's back. There you go. So
okay.
you got the G6, I guess. I guess the Pac-12 went. They got it just demolished. And yeah, they had their media day today. So shout out to the Bulldogs. But it's going to be an improved safety room. When you look at what happened last year with Clemson, I mean, so many big chunk plays were given up with Ronan Hannafin and Ricardo Jones back there. I know Ricardo Jones had and Khalil Barnes, yes. I know Ricardo Jones had 6 interceptions last year, but when you turn on the tape, that's a lot of tip balls heading his way, not really one where he's reading the quarterback's eyes and making these stellar plays. It's ball just kind of falls into his hands. So you have him and as well as Jerome Carter, the Old Dominion transfer. So I'm curious to see how the transition goes, but he's probably one of those players that I think you can plop him anywhere, and he's just got those raw instincts that you want at that position where he can play in the box and make plays in the run game, but certainly stellar in pass coverage as well. It wouldn't shock me if he has one of those all ACC caliber years where maybe someone says, hey, you could be potentially third, second round pick as a safety that has the body type that NFL scouts just drool over for a safety right there. And I mean, shoot, the safety position keeps changing where so many more willing tacklers now, especially in the run game. So wouldn't shock me if Myrick's a 27 guy, but with the way NIL is, maybe Clemson offers him a bag to come back. It's just one of those things where I could see it going either way with him, just depending on the type of year he has.
Yeah, I think the NIL conversation gets interesting when it's guys like I know we talked about this on the annual one, and we'll talk about it again real quick, Jim. But when I said last year during the draft process, before the college football playoff run, it's like, oh, well, could Mark Fletcher really be the RB3 in last year's class? And he went on the playoff run. They ended up falling short, and they wanted to come back. It happened 2 years ago with Drew Aller in Penn State, right? We saw how that kind of happened. So if Clemson goes 10-2, maybe makes the playoff, 9-3, something like that, maybe he does get a bag to come back. But if they go 7-6 again, we might see some of the NFL talent departing for the NFL, because it very well could be Dabo's last season in Clemson. So it's an interesting thought process, because their schedule is very much not easy. Their schedule is very, very difficult. So it's going to be interesting to see how that kind of plays out over the course of the year. And I know Grayson's giving me a side eye with the Dabo comments, but I mean, there's a standard at Clemson, and it hasn't been met in some time.
I would say if it was going to be Dabo Swinney's last year, I would assume there would be there's the buyout money. First of all, is insane for him. Another 7-6 year, probably you start to have that conversation, but I know Swinney utters these talking points like a politician about the state of Clemson. He's like, yeah, so many programs would trade to have our down year, and fans are certainly very in this part of South Carolina. They're very frustrated right now with the state of the program. But I think just based off people that I've talked to inside the building, Swinney feels pretty galvanized, and it feels like you're going to be better this year. And I wouldn't expect them, even if things are a little rocky again, for him to depart. But that's a conversation for another time for sure.
Okay, so we had a comment in the chat about defensive tackle Vic Burley. Taylor, was that a player you had a chance to get to?
That was not a player I had a chance to get to, unfortunately.
Jordan
for Grayson too.
Yeah, so Jordan, did you get to Vic Burley? Do you have a draft assessment?
I don't have a draft assessment on him, but I do have questions about him, because if you ask a college football fan over the last decade, what is Clemson known for producing? It's defensive linemen. And I think it's either defensive lineman, or you could argue it's wide receiver. But I'm gonna lean more defensive lineman. And I think if you're looking at Vic Burley getting off the bus, Vic Burley is an NFL prospect. He's 6'4", 320 pounds. He was a top 50 recruit coming out a couple years ago, and it just hasn't lived up to the hype. Right. So like Sam said, is this the year that he breaks out? And I think that would do wonders for this defense if he does, because like I said, you have Lawson and you have help. You have Sammy Brown, you have Myrick, who I like, you have Hampton. If you give them that interior presence on the defensive line, that allows so many different things to happen for this defense. So they really need him. I think I don't think he's a 2027 guy, because you just haven't seen enough. And he's not going to come out for 1 year unless he just goes out there and truly dominates and has one phenomenal year, which I'm not saying he won't have. I just haven't seen it yet. So again, I think he's somebody that's probably going to be a 2028 guy. But if you look at the tools from a physical standpoint, he has everything. It's just, can he produce on the field? And he's going to get his opportunity this year, because like I said, there's nobody in his way. He's a starter. There's no Peter Woods there. There's no Cape Hart. There's no Steffion Green. He's at LSU now. So he's the guy in the defensive tackle room. So it's put up or shut up for the 5-star.
Yeah, Swinney had said that we talked to him last Tuesday, and he's got a few players on this roster. He obviously didn't name names, but I would imagine Vic Burley is one of his, as he puts it, it's a now or never type of season for him, where injuries have played a big factor in his limitations. When he's on the field, you like what you see. Very athletic, a quick step off the ball, the size you like. He's the first guy you want off the bus, essentially, as Jordan, you had alluded to. So you have all of it together. It's just a matter of is he going to be able to stay on the field is the biggest question. And that's one of the biggest questions for Clemson this year is defensive tackle. Is you have a rotation of Vic Burley, Trent got Marcus Strong out of the transfer portal. You had Courtney Kelly out of West Georgia who ended up tearing his ACL. You think you get him back in November, but a lot of guys that probably are C to B minus guys that you need a Vic Burley to be an A guy. And that'll come down to his availability. And I don't think it's his ability that we're questioning here. I think it's whether he can simply stay on the gridiron. And if he can, I'd imagine he'll have a solid year to be that number one defensive tackle for Clemson. And then, Jordan, as you put it, that NFL lineage that they're going to see production at that position and see if it can translate to Sundays for some of these NFL scouts.
Was he injured a lot last year, like in and out of games? Because he played in almost every single game.
Yeah, a lot of it's like, so you missed 2023 with some time. You start one game in 2025. I think it's just a staff that's in 2024. It was a lot of only played in 8 games. So if they just want to see him kind of put it together. He's only played 21 games in 3 years. So you want to see a little bit more out of him right there. And for him being a top 50 prospect, he was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. So the expectations were super high coming into his college career. So just hasn't really come together necessarily.
No career sacks. Is that what I'm seeing?
Yeah. Just hasn't put it together. But again, it's an opportunity this year to show what you're made of, I guess, for him is living up to the billing of a 5-star prospect.
Okay. So that was defensive tackle Vic Burley from Clemson, likely a 2028. Taylor, is there another player that you would like to comment on from a draft standpoint on the Clemson roster?
Yeah, I absolutely would. And his name is Chris Denson, and he is a quarterback that will be switching to skill position player.
Bad decision.
We don't know. Well, bad decision. I don't know about that because he isn't a very good quarterback. The fact that a true freshman came in there and dominated the quarterback competition battle, it's probably time to move on from him as a quarterback. I would disagree with that statement personally. So I'm actually excited for it. I think now this makes him on potential NFL prospect radar as opposed to being the third string quarterback at Clemson and never seeing the field and certainly never progressing into someone that can play in the NFL. So I guess my question is for Grayson. Have you heard whether it's running back, receiver? I know they just want to get the ball in his hands. And then for Jordan, we'll pivot to you after Grayson. But, which position is going to be better suited for him at the next level?
I think, and I was actually talking with a few people about this last night about Denson, is that Dabo Swinney, I'm sure you guys have maybe tuned into a press conference before, and there'll be a player you've never heard of, and you'd be convinced that guy is the next first overall draft pick in the NFL because Dabo Swinney believes in everybody. That's just the way he operates. So when we heard in the spring after the spring game that he essentially was laying it out to the media that he needed to switch positions, you thought, okay, that's new. That's not really of Sweeney's MO there to do that. And the conversation that we had been hearing is that it was a big winner for him, big spring. They wanted to see a pretty big leap as a passer, and it just never came. And obviously athletically gifted he's probably the most athletically gifted quarterback on that roster in terms of just what he's able to do in space. But on 3rd and 6, they just didn't think he had the juice there to make it as a passer. So their goal right now, as Chad Morrison described to us, is that going to be a little bit of quarterback, probably wildcat, running back and receiver, just going to be a little bit of everywhere. And understanding they have a nice talent athletically, it's just not going to be someone you want under center 3rd and 8. You got to have it. Probably not going to be with his arm there as a passer. So certainly an interesting story there for Denson. But at the same time, I think this is someone that, like you said, Taylor, maybe you're seeing it in a few years where that story is the best thing that ever happened to him, where maybe his switch to running back or receiver gets him to Sundays with just the gifts that he has athletically.
Jordan, any thoughts on the position switch for Chris Denson?
Oh no, I was being funny, Taylor. He's definitely the third best quarterback, and I'm not even a Christopher Vezina fan. I think Christopher Vezina needs to just hand the ball to Tate Reynolds because he's the best quarterback in the league right now.
Yeah, he will. It's gonna be the Cole Stout, Deshaun Watson transition. Go look at those season stats. That was a fun year for Clemson, I'm sure. So,
but yeah, I think like you said, Chris Denson is just a phenomenal athlete, and I think I don't know as far as the next level what it is. Is it wide receiver? Is it running back? But I think of somebody that, like you said, you just want to get the ball in his hand. So I think he's just going to be an athlete, and for Clemson, adding more athletes to this skill room is probably the best thing for the young quarterback. Whether it's Vizina, even I know Vizina's a junior, but he's hasn't really had a ton of reps as a starter quarterback. So obviously he's young in that aspect. But yeah, I'm interested to see how the quarterback battle goes. But for Denson, it's just, hey, you accept whatever the coach tells you, because at the end of the day, like you could harp on it and say I'm going to be a quarterback, and then you're just not going to touch the field this year. So it's really going to be a wasted year. Just go out there, be the athlete that you are, and try to make an impact as much as possible.
Well, and I think it also speaks volumes of the player. They're willing to switch positions.
Yeah.
Right. Because, if we look at this from Denson's perspective, okay, he lost the job, right? Let's say he lost the backup 2 job. It's too late to transfer somewhere else. So you got to make the best of the situation that life threw at you. There's no guarantee that we don't see Denson as a quarterback somewhere else next year, but just good for him that he's making the best of the situation that his football team has thrown at him. But Jordan, I'd like to pivot this to you. What Clemson offensive linemen do you have on your board? Sam Teets mentioned Colin Sadler in the chat. Prior podcast had also mentioned Harris Sewell and Elijah Thurman, but I'm curious, where did your offensive line grade out for Clemson?
Yeah, I think the only one I've really paid attention to was Harris Sewell, the center, and I'm just not impressed. Like as far as it, and we had this conversation last year during the draft cycle. 7 centers are probably going to get drafted. He's not a top 7 center currently, right? So I have him undrafted as an undrafted free agent. Not saying he can't make an NFL roster. I think he's capable, but at the same time, I have a ton of questions for this Clemson offensive line just because it's a ton of unknowns, right? I know last year it was kind of Blake Miller and some guys, right? But it now, you don't have that first round talent on there. So what does it look like for you guys? And I think this is a good year for them to really grow because they are young. I think they are starting 3 sophomores on the offensive line, the starting offensive line this year,
and 1 freshman.
And 1 freshman, yeah. So it's not ideal, but at the end of the day, I think that for them for the future, that's really good because you have those guys, and I know it's NIL, and 3 of these guys can be gone next year. But for them, the continuity they could have, for the next 2 years is really good. But for right now, I'm not a firm believer in any of the offensive linemen for Clemson to get drafted as of today.
Yeah, I'm with
Grayson. Yeah, so Grayson, where are you on the Clemson offensive line right now?
Yeah, this is, if we had to rank positions of concern heading into 2026 in this fall, I would think the offensive line would be at the top. Just because, as Jordan lined out, they're young. There's a lot of inexperience. You're going to be starting 2 tackles that haven't played a lot of ball. Easton Ware projects to be the right tackle right now at Clemson. Hasn't played much. Braden Jacobs was more at left guard last year for some odd reason. But a guy with the big body type and certainly the NFL tackle type. Just really haven't seen him play out there a ton. And certainly, I think in some instances, Braden Jacobs, his stature might be so overwhelming that it won't matter for some of these ACC pass rushers. But you go to a Miami or an LSU where it turns into a Will Campbell situation where it's too quick and they're already past him before he gets out of his drop back. So I think for Clemson in the offensive line this year, it wouldn't shock me if we see some of these freshmen that have signed on that potentially could be vying for a starting job. Grant Wise, 4-star prospect right now. I think he's got a good chance to start at center over Harris Sewell. That's still an ongoing battle. And Colin Sadler, I mean, God bless him, man. He's been injured, it feels like, every year I've covered the beat. It's just a tough going for him, just trying to stay on the field. certainly is when he's available, he's viable, but that availability has been kind of fluctuating over the years. So with a quarterback battle that Clemson's processing right now, that's a position group that'll win or lose you games this year. And so if we're talking about Clemson being 10-2 and 7-6, wouldn't shock me. The offensive line's a big culprit for that.
Okay, thank you, Grayson. So I'm curious, Shaw, do you have any additional players for Clemson that either you want to talk about a second time or that we've missed the first time around?
No, I'm curious. I want to know more about the linebackers and the tight ends. But so linebacker, I guess I'll start with Jeremiah Alexander. So he's a 5th-year guy. He played last year, right? So he's another guy that like potentially late on day 3. That's a name we could be hearing. If he leads this defense alongside Sammy Brown, like I think that's an interesting one. Obviously, doing research for the pod, they were talking. I think it might have been Sammy Brown that had a quote about Kobe McLeod, I believe, and I don't know. There was some comment made about the NIL transfer. There was some issue or something with the linebacker room, but Sammy Brown made a comment about Kobe McLeod. I believe they tried to get a transfer in, right, and they didn't land the transfer, or was it Kobe that was transferring out?
So there was a linebacker from Cal named Luke Farrelly, and he signed with Clemson in January, and he was signed with Clemson for a week and then flipped to Ole Miss. And that was a whole saga about tampering, and that is a podcast in its own right. That was certainly a conversation in January and February, and honestly still is. Questions still fly about the NCAA's actions towards Ole Miss and if justice will be served in Tiger Town and all that stuff. But yeah, Kobe McLeod, Jeremiah Alexander are sort of battling for some of those, I think, weak side linebacker spots right now. And Alexander's case study is interesting because really played as an edge rusher, a reserve edge rusher for his football career and made the move to linebacker. So usually you see them going from linebacker to pass rusher. So the inverse of that, you don't see often. And I talked to Ben Bowler, the linebackers coach at Clemson, about this. Is they feel like he's really come along this spring where really felt like in the fall it was just throwing the kitchen sink at him, where there's so many different calls or coverages that you just had to sort of learn on the fly. And for him, they feel like he can make that leap and be a viable starter. And so the ability to potentially be a third down pass rusher, and then you add some coverage skills on top of that, an NFL draft, an NFL scout might take a chance on that for a day 3 draft selection. So I think Alexander right now probably wouldn't be my pick to start day 1, but certainly will be a viable reserve backer should that arise.
Okay, and Jordan, same close for you. Any player you want to talk about a second time, or is there any Clemson player on your board that we just haven't given a lot of podcast time to tonight?
I'll talk about Sammy Brown. I didn't get to hit on him earlier, but Sammy Brown's one of my favorite prospects in this class. He's my linebacker 1 right now across the country, which I don't know if that's really consensus or not, because I've seen a couple boards that had him like 7 or 8, and I'm like, oh, that's wild. But I've been a fan of Sammy Brown since he came to Clemson. I thought he was, phenomenal as a freshman as well. So somebody that I think can come in day 1 and be an impact starter for an NFL team. I currently have him slotted as a day 2 pick. He'll probably go into maybe late 2nd, early 3rd, just because of what Grayson mentioned earlier. He does have some liabilities in coverage a bit, but as far as like a processor at the point of attack early, close to the line of scrimmage, I think he's phenomenal. There was a couple plays last year where he's beating the running back to a spot, right? As soon as the ball is hiked, and I really don't like to use this name, but it was very reminiscent of Luke Kuechly for me. But again, obviously he doesn't cover as well as Luke, so you don't get that comp. But some similar to how Jeremiah Trotter was it Jeremiah Trotter this past draft?
It's 2 years ago.
Yeah. Josiah Trotter, I'm sorry, this year from Missouri. He was really good close to the line of scrimmage, but he just lacked in coverage, right? So I think, Sammy, obviously I think he's a better athlete than Trotter. So he has the upside. It's just a matter of, can he continue to work on it and get better in that aspect? Because really, like Grayson said, that's one of the biggest things. And to me, it's one of the only things that he really struggles with right now.
Okay, so Grayson, I'll let you kind of put a bow on the whole show here. Any player that you either want to talk about again, you want to talk about any of the guys that Taylor or Jordan just brought up, but the floor is yours. When we think of Clemson in the 2026 season, and then when April and at the draft time rolls around, what do you think the storylines are?
Man, last year, or I guess a few months ago, where in April, it felt like I was glued to my computer for 3 straight nights just because of the volume of Clemson players that got drafted. And the question that kept emerging from that was, how the heck did this team go 7-6 when they have so many of these top 50 selections? It boggles the mind. So this year will be interesting, and I think the volume of draft selections this year actually may inform us of how good this team could be this year, where let's say Will Helt and Sammy Brown, and then heck, let's throw TJ Moore in there as hypotheticals. If you have 3 first rounders, Clemson may be a 9-10 win team if you're getting that type of production, or a Corey Myrick slides into the 3rd round potentially. So I think there's some names on this list that, whether you brought them in for the transfer portal, you're hoping they make another leap here in 2026. It's a strange time for Clemson, because there hasn't been a year in some time where they're not picked to finish 1st or 2nd in the ACC. And now will they be a middle of the pack team at best? And so I'm looking forward to covering it. And I've had a great time with you guys chopping it up about some NFL stuff. This is right up my wheelhouse.
Well, Grayson, we appreciate you coming on. So do you want to take a moment, and we call it podcaster identification, tell the Draft Professor audience about the other content you make, where they can find you? It's very clear that you cover Clemson, and I and the channel love having somebody come in and kind of balance out the draft takes. Just a funny aside, last year we did one of these for Texas, and the Texas podcaster, there was a debate over who was corner 2, and they said, no, it's a freshman. And that freshman lit it up against Ohio State week 1. So it's always nice to have somebody that's outside the draft sphere, kind of just giving us a sounding board for some of our takes this early in the draft cycle. But just feel free to let everybody know how they can find you and the other content that you make.
Hey, you actually just reminded me of a player that I don't think we talked about today, but Elliott Washington, the Penn State transfer. I think he's gonna surprise a lot of people this year as someone that maybe could, based on what I heard this spring, he had an interception almost every single day in practice. So what does that say about the quarterbacks? That might be a conversation for another day, but this is a kid that hyper athletic, ball hawk, great instincts, and I think could be a cornerback that Clemson fans, that could be a fan favorite here pretty soon, and someone that certainly I think could be in the NFL one day if things pan out for him this year. But yeah, just for your podcaster identification. So I am a staff writer over at TigerNet.com. For those who don't know, it's the largest brand covering Clemson athletics. So certainly go check that stuff out. We got a lot of great content there. And then me and our senior writer, David Hood, we host a weekly podcast of the Orange Crush podcast, where we got a ton of fun guests. We'll have LSU previews pretty much in a few weeks, starting from then up to September 5th in Baton Rouge. And then also I do some radio content for our local flag station, 105.5 The Roar, co-hosting the Tiger pregame show, as well as doing some on-air work once an hour every Thursday. So that's a little bit of what I do. And if you guys want to show us some love, feel free to check out my Twitter as well at Gray_man20. And you can give me a follow there.
Grayson, thank you. Taylor, do you want to let everybody know how they can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm over at footballwithchild.com. Just talking about the NFL draft pretty much year round. Do some, NFL college football picks to keep it fun throughout the season. Just free picks, by the way. You guys can go sub, completely free. And yeah, that's where you can find me, just doing some draft scouting. I do want to say, since you cover Clemson athletics as a whole, I'm excited to see Carlito Jones. If you're familiar, he's a track guy, and he joined the team just recently, not too long ago. I think spring or fall, I don't know, winter of 2026. But Carlito Jones,
very recent.
6'8". He's going to play tackle, I guess. I don't know. He's massive. I was just clicking around while we were, sitting here talking, but he was a great track athlete for 2 years, and he just walked onto the football team. So interesting guy to bring to the O-line room there. But go ahead, Jordan. Tell him where your content is. Just had to bring up Carlito Jones. That's an awesome name.
Yeah, Jordan Hunt. You can find me on Twitter, Panthers Pulse. Do a lot of Panthers coverage, draft coverage as well. I try to get at least 2 to 3 posts a day. I'm trying to get my Substack to work with me and getting at least 1 to 2 posts on there a week as well. I've had some pretty good traction lately as far as my draft content. But yeah, like I said, Panthers Pulse on Twitter, posts daily. So if you want to talk about Panthers, you want to talk about draft content, you can find me over there.
So I first want to thank Grayson, Jordan, and Taylor for helping put the show together. We can't do this without them, so thank you. We also want to remind everybody, Draft Professor is here every day. So ironically, we're covering LSU tomorrow night. It's the same show tomorrow night. We're just switching the team. But we're doing every night of the week, we're going to be doing a different team. So it's LSU on Tuesday. It's Iowa on Wednesday. Thursday is an offensive tackle show. Friday, we're covering Alabama. Sunday, I'd have to look as to who we're covering Sunday night. That's already escaped me. Also want to say I host a Buffalo Bills podcast with fellow draft professor Owen that's on the Overreaction Buffalo channel, and that's every Thursday at 7 p.m. We're known as Mafia BPA, as in the best podcasters available. So for Jordan, Taylor, Grayson, myself, everybody at the Draft Professor, thank you so much for watching. We will see you on a podcast again tomorrow night. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.